I have the pleasure of serving Palo Alto Unified School District as the Director of Wellness and Support Services, which is a department that is focused on supporting the social, emotional, the physical, and mental health needs of our students, TK-12. While my department primarily supports our Tier 1 or our universal supports and our Tier 2, which is more specialized intervention, we do help with the coordination of all of the programs across the district to try to make sure that our students and our families know where to get services depending on what their needs are. So I have the thrill and the pleasure of being our host today and welcoming you to this amazing opportunity to engage in some social emotional learning for ourselves as adults so that we can provide that to the students, the children, the nieces and the nephews, all the young ones that are in our care, but also so we can provide it to other adults that are nearby us too. Because if we've seen anything from the challenges that we are navigating recently, both with COVID and our reckoning with racial injustice, we are seeing that these skills are so needed to help us all be adaptive and adjust and become transformative. So thanks again. I'm Miriam, happy to be here. Housekeeping items. Today we're going to be monitoring the Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them in there, and our panelist, which I'll introduce in a short bit, will be monitoring that for you. All the recordings will be available afterwards and will be sent to registered participants. So if you had a friend who meant to be here and couldn't join us, they'll get a link. There will also be a link with some follow-up feedback, which is really appreciated as we crafted this today's workshop in partnership with Acknowledge Alliance and our PTA. But we can always craft the next session to adapt, adjust the next session to adapt to the needs that people are communicating. So again, Q&A, and please give us feedback and look out for the resources on the video shortly. I would like to introduce our partners in today's adventure. First of all, behind the scenes, I know I'm talking, so I'll just point to our pictures because you won't be able to see them in the profile. Betty Loomis is joining us. She's both a parent in the community, and she is the other part of my brain and the thing that helps me and our whole department function to be able to support you all. So she is going to be available to us both for logistical support, but also insight and application of some of these concepts as a parent in the community. Also with us today is Indira. Indira is a longstanding advocate in our PTA of wellness, all things wellness, and in particular, she specializes in our social emotional supports. And so she has been a hub of that for our PTA to recruit parents. So I'm going to put a little shameless plug in there. If you're looking to get involved or just informed about what our schools are doing to support social emotional learning, Indira is your person. Reach out to her. She will happily take all champions who are looking to become informed or to become involved in spreading that. She runs our Project Cornerstone as our parent liaison, and she's been doing that, I believe, for over 13 years or so, and currently serves as our chair of social emotional learning. She's laughing. She's been involved in this work, maybe not officially for 13 years, but I know that that's the length of time that she does it. She's also a proud parent of a Hoover student and a JLS student now. And she is working her way through our fantastic district and along the way helping us make it even more supportive of our students with her information. So lastly, I'm going to speak a little bit about Acknowledge Alliance. Acknowledge Alliance is a community-based organization that we have had the honor of partnering with for a great deal of time. Acknowledge Alliance is in our community beyond Palo Alto. They primarily focus on supporting elementary schools and by providing prevention services. In particular, they focus on professional guidance, training, and coaching for adults, much like today's session, to help them as they work to support our students in developing their lifelong resiliency and their learning. So life learning as well as academic learning. If you don't have these social emotional skills, it makes all of the other aspects of academic learning much more challenging. Acknowledge Alliance also provides intensive long-term services to high school youth to address complex trauma and crisis intervention and to re-engage them in successful learning. They are fantastic and a long-standing in the community since, I believe, 1994, and we've been thrilled to have them in our schools working on their Resiliency project and bringing that to life for our staff and students. With us today from Acknowledge Alliance is Dr. Sara Kramer. I always mean that to say, so Kramer. And I beg forgiveness in advance for that mistake. She is the director of Resilience Consultation Program at Acknowledge Alliance and oversees all of the services in San Mateo and Santa Clara County schools and organizes those efforts to advance prevention-focused mental health and social emotional learning across our entire community. I'm thrilled to also introduce her as a licensed professional clinical counselor and board certified art therapist. Really, if you ever have the opportunity to work with Sara Kramer in person or on Zoom, you should take advantage of it. Her work is fantastic and will really help you in wherever you are in your personal journey of growth. And lastly, and she is recently named as of, I believe, about a month ago, a doctorate. She's earned her doctorate from De Manier University, where she finished her PhD not too long ago. So we're thrilled to congratulate her and welcome her as well. With that, I'm going to turn this to Indira for some welcoming comments and our PTA partners, and we appreciate their support for today's adventure.
I need to unmute. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Miriam, for the lovely introduction. Yes, I am thrilled to be here and to partner with PAUSD and Acknowledge Alliance on this webinar series. PTAC, or the Palo Alto Council of all PTAs, is always happy to partner, support, collaborate, and help PAUSD to engage parents and students and their families in any of their efforts related to student well-being. I thank Sara for coming forward today and putting together this wonderful webinar series on behalf of our parents and students. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the attendees. Many of you, a few of you at least would have attended the first session. We are very happy and thankful for you joining us back. And to those who are joining us fresh today, we hope you enjoy the webinar and join us in the last session as well. We all know from many studies and research that social and emotional learning matters a lot in positive life outcomes like success in school, college completion, and also later in life to thrive as successful adults. It is increasingly being recognized that social and emotional skills form the foundation of mental well-being and help immensely in the prevention of mental health crisis in children and youth. So given the current unexpected increase in the stress and anxiety levels in all of us, adults and children alike, because of the COVID pandemic, it becomes more relevant that we consciously work towards learning how to elevate these stressors for our good mental health. And therefore, the need is now to talk about one of the most important non-cognitive skills, resilience. This skill, as most of us know, does give us the ability to deal with stress, setbacks, challenges, crises, an array of hardships whenever that confronts us in life. And so now, without any further ado, I request Sara to share with us so that we all can learn and build this very important skill in us and in our children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm needing some extra resilience. My computer is closing things out, turning things on. So let's see how this goes. So thank you so much for the lovely introductions. And so my name is Sara Kramer, and I am the Director of the Resilience Consultation Program with Acknowledge Alliance. And as Miriam said, we do focus our work. We're a mental health professional agency, and we support teachers, school staff, administrators, as well as students, parents. We're really looking at supporting the whole school community through our strengths-based and resilience. We have a resilience foundation in our support. So we have quite a few different things that we do, but one of the things that's I think is going to be especially relevant that we talk about today, I'll share a little bit from our Project Resilience. This is our social emotional learning curriculum that is really around trying to build the resilience in not just students, but the entire classroom, including their teachers. So we will get a chance to take a look at some of those activities. But before we get started, I wanted to see, we're going to do a little poll here. And if you were with us last week, they are the exact same questions. So if you don't mind letting me know the school level that your children are in, as many answers as apply. Elementary, middle school, high school. And just to let you know that Acknowledge Alliance does provide services in elementary and middle school, the Resilience Consultation Program that is. And okay, so that's pretty good. We got a good number of people here. Let me share the results here. So we can see a lot of high school parents are here and families. And about the same number of elementary and middle school. Okay, great, thank you. And let me do our second poll. Here we go. How have the last 3 months been for you? Mostly stressful or anxious, mostly wonderful or calm, or maybe a little bit of both depending on the day. I'm sure there's many other answers here. Okay, give you just a couple more seconds. All right, that's good. We have the majority of people voting. Here we go. Interesting, same as last time. I think we have about, more people said about a little bit of both. About a third of you are saying mostly stressful or anxious. Small number of people saying mostly wonderful or calm. And I think I missed last week, I said that we want to hear from you on your resilient strategies, if it's been wonderful and calm. So we do want to hear from you as we go through and talk about different strategies. Thank you for that. And then let's do the third and last poll here. The focus of this series is for families, but a lot of that has to do with your own resilience. As parents, you're leading your families. Let's see what your own resilience skills are, either in need of some work and support, pretty good so far, or getting me through this situation well. You might be, there's some children outside of my house right now who are enjoying the afternoon. You might be hearing some of that in the background. Okay. Couple more seconds. And here we go. All right, so pretty similar to last time. I think a lot of people are here because they need some work and support on their resilience skills. But it's good to see that quite a few of you are also saying, you're kind of doing okay. This is sort of the good enough and doing good. So great, thank you for that. All right, so as with last week, we talked a little bit about resilience. We talked about some definitions. Does anyone, I'm happy to take if anyone has any questions. If you were here last week, if you thought about something, you have a question, feel free to type it in at any point, and we'll kind of round up to that. But if anyone has any burning question right now, I'm happy to address that before we jump into our next topic. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So, talked about that. Basically, we're going to use the same agenda across all 3 sessions. a little bit of information to get started, take those questions, have some conversations, and then we're going to talk about some strategies for you to put into place. So we're really, the focus of this session is thinking about strengths and challenges. And I would really love to hear right now, if you can type into the Q&A panel, what have been your strengths or the strengths of your family? What have been your challenges or challenges for your family? So if you can go ahead and type those in, and let's see, as you're thinking about strengths and challenges, let's see what comes up. It's a way for us to get started talking about how strengths and challenges support building resilience. And I don't know if you were here last time, I am a therapist and I'm quite comfortable with silence, so we'll see what happens. Okay, I see one strength, being together with the family during these times. Excellent. Excellent. That's a really wonderful strength here. Miriam, did you want to jump in and read aloud some of our responses?
Yes, happy to.
Okay.
So we've got some like concern areas as well coming in, some patterns with that, so I'll group that. I'll start with the concerns and then I'll sprinkle in the strengths to balance them out. So a lot of the areas of struggle are around uncertainty right now in the levels of life, all kinds of aspects of life, and including also around getting along. So navigating those interpersonal tensions and dynamics and relationships in confined spaces. And then some patterns around strengths are really like trying to plan for what we know, but adjusting and being flexible and accepting the need for that. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, some areas around challenges around communication and whether or not we're communicating effectively, but also how our emotions can amplify, whether it's volume or, you know, how under pressure we lose our best abilities to communicate in our calmest ways. And so some discussion around those tension points.
Great, great, thank you for that. Well, that sounds about right for most families that are across the globe that are trying to figure out how to deal with the global pandemic. And in the United States, there are a lot of things coming up around the recent protests and people realizing the extent to the injustices in our systems. There's a lot going on. I'll show you, I have a little more information to share about that in a moment. So strengths and challenges are definitely a part of how we handle and build our own resilience. This is a graph from a recent study, and you know, when we share the slides, you'll be able to take a look at all the references. This is a pre-printed study, so this has not been peer-reviewed, but it is very kind of hot off the presses data. This was a study around adult perceptions of COVID-19 and mental health. So looking for my slide to give me some information here about exactly what this is. So realizing how the pandemic really substantially changed life for many families. This was a nationally representative online sample of adults in the US in late April 2020, compared to a pretty similar number of people from 2018. They compared it to the National Health Interview Survey. So asking about mental distress. And what they found is that compared to the 2018 sample, adults in the US this year in April were 8 times more likely to fit criteria for serious mental distress and 3 times more likely to fit criteria for moderate or serious mental distress. These differences between the 2 years, the 2 samples, appeared across all demographic groups, with larger differences among younger adults and those with children in the household. So probably not a surprise to those of you with kids. So we can really see that these are ages. The bottom, the yellow line, those who are 60 and above, green between the ages of 45 to 59, blue 30 to 44, and red 18 to 29. And so that age range between 18 and 44 saw the highest numbers. And this is just April 2020. This is very unprecedented. The next slide shows a little breakout between the numbers of adults who were reported. Again, on the y-axis, we can see the percentage with serious mental distress, where they might qualify for specific criteria. The blue line at the bottom one, those who do not have children, and look at the red line, those with children, much higher, much higher. And then finally, this is the last graphic that is looking at the different kinds of symptoms that might come up in terms of mental distress. Starting from the top, nervous, restless, everything feels like an effort, sad, hopeless, and worthless. So we can see between the 2 years just how much that changed for everyone. So this is, I hope this is a way to kind of normalize some of the feelings you might be having, to really be able to know that you are not alone. That is another important part of building resilience, is knowing that there are other people out there who are also in the same position, and we are all trying to deal with this in very different ways. One of the things I do want to mention, because we are focusing on some strengths and challenges and kind of overall resilience, what do you think, and this is going to be something I'd love for you to type into the Q&A box, what do you think are the most important childhood predictors of life satisfaction once you grow up? So what is something that happens when you're a child that will help predict the most satisfaction you have as an adult? So if Miriam, you can help me out.
I will help you out. And just to reiterate, we're looking for what people think the predictors are.
Yes.
Of that life satisfaction of adulthood.
The most important ones. Mm-hmm.
The most important ones. Our first contribution is how we are treated. So whether we're raised on love, nurturing, a big part of that is a strong predictor. We also have flexibility, our ability to be flexible and adaptive. Feeling loved, again, that pattern of if we're raised on care or raised on fear coming up. I'll wait a little bit longer. The chat seems to have a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
Some other things there that came in since we talked before. Real patterns of the dynamic around kind of communicating and being able to hold emotions of other people, our children in particular, and how we can build up our strength to be able to do that with our own strong will, with our own strong emotions. So those charts, I think, are really resonating with a lot of people as they are feeling that and living that tension and that dynamic.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so other indicators, predictors of satisfaction in life in adulthood. We've got more of that theme of caring relationship and connection to a grown-up adult. A real strong shout out for consistency or some stabilized environment, feeling like you have what you need and you can expect and predict that. That's helpful for people. And then the same themes of that love, support, that connection to someone who cares for you, coming in again as more people respond.
Okay, great. Thank you. And what about our panelists? Would you like to chime in? Any guesses? Indira, Miriam, or Betty?
Yes, I would like to chime in. Thank you, Sarah. I think the feeling of security which comes from having a trusted, loving adult is, I think, despite whatever challenges a child, as a child, faced during my growing years, just the security and the thought that, oh yes, I can go back home and there's mommy, there's daddy. That comfort is unexplainable, but I think that is a very important one as well. That's what I feel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that that I would have to echo what Indira said, that having a solid foundation, or having loving, trusting adults that you can go to is very important.
Okay, thank you. Miriam.
Yeah, I echo that. I really agree with that. I think the thing I would add is that relationship is so important because it models for us, right? It gives us that imprinting of someone who shows us not only that we're loved and accepted, but also how do we deal with adversity? How do we are going to fall down. It's not about never failing. And someone in the Q&A also talked about this, but it's about how we cope with setbacks, how we, I don't want to be a spoiler, but my guess is how we respond to adversity, or what resilience we're able to demonstrate.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, this is a panel and an audience of amazing experts here. You all have really guessed well. This is research, so they're in, kind of fairly limited research terms, but in general, emotional health, and in general, pro-social behaviors. So a lot of you mentioned things that are specific to emotional health, feeling loved, coming from a family that supports you, the importance of a caring adult. But it also means being able to identify your own emotions, and having that emotional intelligence that people talk about. Pro-social behaviors has to do a lot with how you reach out and connect with others. How are you making friends? How are you supporting others? How do you approach a situation so that you are also advocating for yourself as well as helping someone else? So those are the two most important predictors. So this is always the interesting part. What do you think is the least important predictor? So what is the least important when it comes to feeling satisfied as an adult, something that happened back in their childhood? What do you think is the least important here? If you can go ahead and put your guesses into the Q&A box, and then Miriam will chime in when we see some things.
The first one is the one that came to mind for me as well, and that's financial, like money. Well, I know that money can have a real limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
I also know that in terms of satisfaction, that's not essential. Some of our audience members are echoing that. This one is fantastic too, grades. So all these external kind of metrics or reinforcement, material possession along those same themes, and how much stuff they have. That seems to be the thing that's resonating the most with our audience. Betty, Indira, do you have other thoughts you also want to include?
I think one of the main things for me, just speaking from my own experience, is what as a child, it was really important to me what people thought about me. Later on, as an adult, it's the least most important thing that predicted my satisfaction in adulthood. What people think about me is not at all even in my frame of thought. So I would guess that would be one of those things.
In my case, I think I would agree with a few of our participants. I think money, the financial and the material aspect of it, that didn't bother much. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would say that would have been the least one of the least predictors for life satisfaction for me. Yeah.
We have
Thanks.
more contributions coming in that echo that, and then also echo academic performance, or that external affirmation. I support that because we all know so many brilliant people who maybe didn't get good grades but are highly successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's what it is.
Strong academic performance that hasn't translated into their life satisfaction or their contentment with things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Here's the big reveal. Academic success. So I love this, this little statistic that comes out of this research, because, when we talk about the importance of school and what school is there for, we really tend to focus in on academic success. And that really becomes this driving force behind a lot of parenting as well. And so it's really important to remember that as we get older, academic success, I'm not saying it's not important, okay? It is really important to do your best and to be motivated by learning. But what we're really seeing is across the board for adults, having this strong foundation in social, emotional health is far more important than anything around grades. Okay, so am I going to do this? Let me stop for some questions and conversations before I share out some strategies, because I have some specific things to talk about.
So while we're waiting for some contributions to come into the Q&A, I think it's so interesting about that academic success one, because when we first started talking about the challenges and the strengths that we're seeing right now, a lot of the challenges that parents were talking about is trying to manage their kids doing that work. And so it feels like a very pressurized thing. And I agree with you, academic performance learning is actually what academic performance should indicate, right? That learning is important, but often this pressured situation, which takes up the majority of the stress and creates tension in the family, is one of the least predictors of our inevitable success, right? So I think that's interesting. I'm not seeing any current Q&As, which means right now I'll do the awkward wait time. I know Sarah's comfortable with silence, as am I. But last, I'm going to give you kind of a closing window to enter any questions that you might have right now related to this. The things that we're still kind of pending that we haven't talked about from previous is really this communication, ability to communicate and stay emotionally balanced. And then the pattern that we're seeing with people who are contributing is that becomes a bigger challenge, especially when you might have a strong-willed parent and a strong-willed child, which is a strength to get through things, but then also can be difficult when you're trying to work through conflict. And that's echoed by another person who talks about the challenges that they're seeing related to communication in their household and being able to hold their calm and create a space where their teenager can communicate their authentic emotions. But how do we not react to that and then escalate those things? So I'll pause for a bit. And Sarah, if you have any thoughts on, how resiliency can affect us in our self-regulation, that would set conditions to help with communication and holding our emotions and emotions of others so that we can respond rather than just react. I'll pause there and see what your thoughts are, and then I'll bring in another point in just a second.
Well, that's such a great question, and it comes up all the time. I definitely have personal experience with that situation as well. Some of the slides that I'm going to be coming to will talk a little bit more about that. But really, we're talking about the idea of regulation, self-regulation, of emotional regulation, and how do you take care of yourself first? A lot of times people talk about it as really in the moment being able to take a breath and pause. Because what's happening is that when you are emotionally triggered, inside your brain. I don't know if anyone's seen this model or talked about Dan Siegel's model of the brain. This is what we do talk about in Project Resilience as well. If you think about your brain, kind of your whole brain as your hand, you tuck your thumb in, this is your amygdala. This is your emotional center. And if you pull the rest of your fingers over, then this is your, what we call the front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. And your amygdala is your emotional center, like I said. This is where responses to fear, anger, even joy really originate here. This is kind of where it starts. And sometimes this feeling is so overwhelming that we forget to connect to our thinking brains, the prefrontal cortex. So Dan Siegel has this phrase he uses that you flip your lid, you lose that connection. And when we talk about this in Project Resilience, there's so many students who are like, I've never heard that phrase before. But it's this idea that your connection, your brain is, all the neural connections you've made from your emotional center to your prefrontal cortex. When your emotional center is overwhelmed, when this triggering event happens, it's really difficult, even as an adult, to find those connections up to this thinking part where you can be logical, where you can be rational, where you can plan ahead. It's hard, you really lose it. So some of the strategies I'll be talking about are ways to slow that down so that you don't immediately blow up, but how can you get back into going slower and planning?
Yeah. It's rare that our best moments in life are when our lid is flipped, right? So often, that's when we're in that fight or flight stage, when we go back into survival because we feel very threatened or overly stimulated and we can't make sense of everything. And how important it is to find language as adults and model that too for, I'm overwhelmed right now. I need to calm that. But it's so helpful when you start to give even young kids that language, because then they can start to realize before they get to the flipping stage, like I'm approaching, and that's easier to come back and it takes less energy. Whereas if you've already flipped, it's going to take longer and more fatiguing as a part of the process. So really helpful framework to hold, and also to start saying things like, there's too much going on. I have too many emotions. I need to take space so I can make sense of them before I'm going to speak or I'm going to act on them. I really like that, building in a pause for people and a breath for people. All right. I'm not seeing other questions. We're seeing similar questions around socializing and an impact on baseline calm, because there's a lot more anxiety, and this method of connecting, especially through Zoom, can create more of a social stress, a social anxiety. And so it's easier in person if we can have that in-person cue and energy. Yes. And some people are having a harder time showing up in the same way, and actually are more escalated before they even start a school class, for example, because the medium is putting them into that flipped state. Yes. And so I don't know if there's any kind of talking we want to do about that, or you want to integrate that as you talk about the practical strategies.
Let me be thinking about that as we go into some strategies here. And we'll hopefully have a little time at the end too if you have any additional questions as well. So thinking about strengths are really important, especially as we're talking about dealing with anxieties, dealing with depression, dealing with a lot of those stressful outcomes that we feel in our bodies. When you're able to focus in on strengths, then you're able to kind of find in yourself ways to get through something. How can you bounce back? You're able to identify the strengths that you have that will move you forward. This is from our curriculum called Project Resilience. We do focus in on strengths in a very specific way. We use the VIA character strengths. It's called Values in Action. I'll show you my next slide explains a little bit about that. But we ask for the students to identify their own strengths, reflect on ones that are already strong, and then strengths they would like to grow. We all have this capacity to have all of these strengths, and what can we do to really create these environments where we're building more and we're continuing to work on them. We also do in our classrooms, we ask everyone we always close with a little gratitude practice, and we ask all students to identify one strength of their teacher, which is always pretty interesting. And it's a very emotional moment. This is something you can do at home. You can go to the VIA website. They do have a quiz that you can take, a survey that will help you identify what your strengths are. They do have a youth version as well. And then they have a lot of tips on how to integrate using those strengths as you're moving forward. And I think that these are going to be especially important as you're talking to each other. This is a little bit of that communication piece, because when you are bringing in negativity, like negative talk, identifying flaws, weaknesses, trying to fix a problem, fixers, that being a fixer is tough to get out of. What's happening is that for the other person that you're talking with or talking to, they get this activation in their negative emotional attractor part of their brains. That increases stress, it increases defensiveness, and it causes more shutting down. However, if you're focusing on reinforcing and encouraging aspirations and goals, kind of what is strong, not what is wrong. That's a nice way of talking about strengths too. They see this, the person you're speaking with will have this activation in their positive emotional attractor, which means that that impacts their positive affect, right? Their positive emotions, stress reduction. They're able to plan for the future better, have better cognitive functioning, increase perceptual accuracy and openness. So neuroscience also is a way of being kind of reinforces what we know through common sense. But the more that you can add on some of these positive strengths in terms of your communication, you're going to see a shift in the conversation with a person. Thinking about your children, really focusing in on what they're doing well and how they can, and besides just what they're doing well, how they're using their strengths to carry on and to bounce back is going to be really important. I love this illustration. So when we talk about how we're getting through the day, are we mindful or are we mindful? And this is difficult, really, it's been such a positive way would be to say what an opportunity we've had to be more mindful and try to be in the present moment of just what is in front of us, instead of filling our heads with everything that's happening, including being in the future, being in the past, worry, anxiety. So the more that you can do yourself and that you can model for your family and even have your children do it, to engage in these mindfulness practices, that's a way of slowing down. That's a way of bringing calm into a situation. There's one practice I wanted to highlight, I'll have to come back to this, is this grounding technique called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you're feeling in the moment where something's happening, you're feeling activated, you feel your emotional brain has kind of flipped your lid and you're unable to think about what's the best way to proceed, you can go through this checklist. So you name 5 things you see, 4 things you feel. So that's like tactile, like really touching something, maybe touching your shirt, touching a table. 3 things you can hear. So you stop and say, and think to yourself, okay, I hear a bird, I hear the sound of a car, right? So you're really stopping to do that. 2 things you can smell, whatever is around you. And then 1 thing you can taste. And this might be helpful. You can always, grab a little snack and put it in your mouth. So this grounding technique really brings you back into your body. And it also is engaging in different parts of your brain that are kind of re-engaging this system to help you think more clearly and calmly and more rationally.
I love how it also adds in that piece of like, are your basic needs met? You know, so sometimes when we're dysregulated, a large part of it might be we're tired, we're hungry, we're hangry, all of the things together.
Yes.
And we're our youngest child, right? Like we're our little teeniest person inside. So I love how that last step really brings you back into, wait, am I hungry? Do I need to address any of my basic needs? Would that help?
Great. And this is something you can do as a whole family. So if you have those classic moments of family meltdowns, where it just sort of seems to like a domino and suddenly everybody seems to be having a tantrum, you stop. Maybe this doesn't happen to you. It's happened in my family.
I think it resonates with everyone.
Okay, great. Not just me.
Not just you. No, you're not alone. Resilience. We're here for you.
So everyone just stop, and then everyone identifies 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you get down to 1, you may notice that the energy comes down. There might be a shift. So that's a great strategy to use. One other thing I'll mention is it's this thing called the mood meter from a program called Ruler. And this is something that we also use in Project Resilience as a way to help students be thinking about how do they start identifying their emotions. So it's set up on this really nice XY axis, and so that the level of pleasantness is down at the bottom. It goes from unpleasant to very pleasant, from left to right, and then energy goes from low energy at the bottom up to high energy. And they use these colors to try kind of give you a sense of what a feeling might, I guess, kind of our associations of colors to feelings. So here's a good example of someone who's kind of added in some information here. Unpleasant and low energy might be sad or tired or depressed. Unpleasant and high energy might be mad, worried, scared. More pleasant, but maybe low energy might be calm or peaceful, or what does it say, comfortable, I think. Grateful is another one that you can include there. And then sort of the idea of having higher energy with that same pleasant feeling might put you at confident, brave, energized. So this is something that you can use at home. There is an app you can use. And so you can use it on your phone. You can have your family check in. It's a really nice way to start to identify these emotions. And I do want to say, like, emotions are really important here. We talked a little bit about emotions. I think we talked about emotions last week. I always talk about emotions. Emotions are really important to thinking about attention, memory and learning, decision-making, the quality of relationships that you have, your physical and mental health, and just how you operate. As if we ignore our emotions, then we're missing out on a large part of how we operate and how we exist in the world. So, okay, whoops, come back. So here's a little checklist. I love lists. Here's another 10 things. These are gathered together from a couple different places, and you'll see that on the references once we post the slides. But really, I would say to start off with this idea of checking in with yourself. Go through some of these strategies or these techniques, or maybe it's something else that you really enjoy doing, or something that you're used to. That's a way of stopping yourself to take a moment to see what's going on, what's happening on the inside, and then how can I really, do I need to shift anything? Am I okay with how it's going? Is there something I need to attend to? And that's a great way of modeling that for your children and your family too. Thinking about filtering what reaches your children as much as you can, and that's going to really be dependent upon the age level. So your elementary age children you might not want to have them see as much as high school youth. So that's really going to be dependent upon your family and how you have conversations about things. Committing to action. There are a lot of things we can all do right now that are related to everything that we're dealing with. So one of the most important things is to, for us to keep that curve low, is that by staying home, by following all of the protocols that science is telling us really helps. That's an action you can take that really supports your community. It could also be that you're supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, other groups that are working towards equality. So how can you work and commit to doing something to support that? Listening to your children and supporting their actions as well. Asking them, having conversations about what they think is going on and how they can help. Young people often are seen as the recipients of help and service, but we really have to remember that they can also be the sources of giving to others. And a lot of times they have a lot of solutions that we don't have as adults. Number 5, drawing their attention to the good things. We talked a little bit about this last week. We did that silver linings exercise. So really remembering in the midst of what may feel pretty terrible is to come back to silver linings. I was just talking with my mom today, and we got to a really low, dark place where it's like, oh, everything's bad. I said, Mom, we can't do this. We have to come back up. We need to remember some things that are going well. We did that, and then we started to go down again. I was like, stop, we need to come back up. So it's not a way, you're not ignoring some of the problems that exist in the world. It's not a way of saying they don't exist, but it's a way of trying to rebalance and bring the positive back up. Taking the time to do activities that you'll all enjoy together. Shifting, giving everyone a chance to choose an activity is another way to do that. Renew your energy with a supportive check-in on other parents that you know. So it can be really isolating to be here by yourself and in your family. And those are definitely, we talked about some strengths of being together as a family, but it's also really important to check in with people that you know, other parents that you've normally seen kind of on a casual basis. Maybe start to do that, because there may be some families that are really suffering and don't know how to ask for help and don't know where to go. Number 9, I would say celebrate what you appreciate. Let's remember that there are opportunities for us to connect and not to forget that there are great things going on in the world and in our own lives, and to really celebrate those. And then finally, I would say take the time to slow down and rest. Summer is a good time. Summer sometimes feels like, everyone recharges and vacations and trips, and we got to work on this and work on that. This may be a really, probably the best summer for everyone, just to slow that down, recharge, try to rest, read some books, really take the time to slow it down. And that's going to help with resilience building over the summer. Okay, and I want to come back to one of my slides. I think I put it in the wrong spot. We'll have a little thing to end with. Here we go. There we go. So really think, I love this, this idea. I read about it in a blog post, this idea of focusing on the space between the trees. So as you're going through the summer, you're engaging, you're interacting, you're fighting, you're loving your family, it's all of that. But really thinking about looking to where you want to go. Where do you want to be as a family? What's your family's path? And really keeping your eye on going ahead, rather than thinking about all the parts of that path that are coming up. I should back up. This is a metaphor for when you're learning how to ski or mountain bike, where you look ahead. You're trying to look for your path between the trees. If you stopped and looked at every single tree, you're not going to go very far. And you might also end up crashing into something. So you have to put your attention on this path forward, keeping your your gaze going ahead. And that will help you move forward, and then you don't get stuck in some of these individual trees of worry or individual trees of anxiety. Try to think about having this long view of moving ahead, and that could be a strategy that could be helpful going through the summer.
As a former mountain biker, I haven't been for a while. This really resonates because when you're first learning, it's so intimidating and you don't see a pathway ahead. And I think this really parallels with some of the commentary from the Q&A, is this charting a course through uncertainty. And one thing that also helps is, what's the next right turn, like the next right step or the next right thing, rather than feeling like we have to see it all the way. You're just looking for that one entry point where there's enough width for you to get through. Until I did it, I never thought it was possible, but it is. It actually, and if you hold on too tight or if you brake too quick, because you will have that accident or go over the handlebars, so yes. I really appreciate that metaphor for so many reasons. I'm looking for, I know we're closing, so I'm gonna just put a little shout out for anyone to put some Q&A in. There were a couple of things I wanted to bring up. I would love that you were referencing Ruler, and Mark Brackett has his new book out, With Permission to Feel, that really goes more in depth in terms of the concepts you were talking about, and that emotional regulation. And just sometimes what we need is that permission, because we don't always train ourselves to honor feelings as information, rather than we tend to stigmatize our feelings as things that dysregulate us or, that are problematic, rather than information about how we need to act, and just adjusting our thinking about that. I'm looking for any questions. I'm not seeing them. So I think we had either really successful training, or we had just a lot of geniuses in the room with us today. There was one question that's more logistics around, is there high school classes that focus on resilience? And there are within, I can speak for Palo Alto Unified, but I know that we might have members from our broader community here today. But typically there's several. One class that really handles a lot of this too is the positive psychology courses that they're offered. And they really talk about, at that age, what adolescents tend to tell us that they're willing to learn about their feelings. They hate when you call it social emotional learning. So anything like that, they hate it, even if it really is helpful and informative and important. But they like it if you call it neuroscience and you talk to them about the science of their brains. But there are social emotional classes at Gunn, as well as social emotional learning, including resiliency, is a part of Pally's advisory program also. And I know as our teachers become more aware and develop their own capacity, they integrate it into how they approach their classes, including, what do we need to do in order to calm our brains, transition, go from that mind full of 1,000 things to more of mindful, and be able to improve our performance. While I know the question was about high school, I'm going to do one more SEL kind of advocacy in general. If we're teaching this in high school, we're teaching it too late. And by high school, it should be really, yes, we still have to have explicit information that's age relevant to them, related to resilience, so they see the application. But really, that should just be an extension of their previous learning about themselves and their self-awareness.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it also starts at home. Parents are the first SEL teachers. And so the more that you can model that, the more that I'll put up some other SEL resources on our shared Google document. The more that you can be doing that at home, especially with really young children, the more comfortable they are, no matter what we call it and what we have to call it by the time they get to high school, the more they'll be at ease with being able to do these kinds of strategies and how they think about it.
All right. We're reaching the limit of our time, so I just want to express great gratitude for all of you who were able to join us today and prioritize this space for your own resilience, even if it's just reconnecting with things that you already know, or just putting that at the forefront of your full mind. I hope that this has been helpful for that way. You will receive a feedback survey, so we ask that you complete that. Additionally, the next webinar will be held on next Thursday, same time, same link. And so if you want to invite somebody, the registration, I believe, is still open. Indira's nodding, so there's still space for that. And I think that's everything.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a good night, and we will see you next week.